Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to go over some different kinds of orchid barks and other orchid mixes that I use to repot up different varieties of orchids. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different ingredients in front of me, and I'm just going to describe a little bit about what each one is and when I would use these ingredients and in what mixture, the reasons behind using the ingredients and that sort of thing. So if you want to learn how to make your own orchid mix, stick along for this video and I will show you the ingredients that I use. Alright, so let me start by saying these aren't the only ingredients. There's lots of other ingredients. I'm sure everybody has their favorite ingredient. These are just mine. They're my favorites because between all of them I can make a mix for any kind of orchid, it seems, and they're easy for me to get, which is important. So in some countries maybe some of these ingredients aren't going to be so easy, so you'll be subbing other ingredients that are going to be similar that work properly for you. So let's start with the main one here. This is a medium fir bark. I use the medium fir bark in almost everything. Medium fir bark, when in a larger quantity like this, gives excellent drainage and big air spaces to the roots, and most orchids are going to want good airflow to the roots. So the medium fir bark is always one of my main ingredients. This one over here is going to be a fine fir bark. Same sort of idea as the medium-sized fir bark, but this is going to be great for frags and paths and other generally terrestrial orchids that still need lots of air to the roots. Fir bark is probably one of the worst ingredients for holding moisture. So if you want a plant to dry out quickly, fir bark like this is a good substrate to use. For a person that likes to water every day, a mixture of mainly fir bark is going to be probably the way to go. Other than the barks there, my next favorite ingredient is Spagna Moss. So Spagna Moss is a long moss like this. It's fantastic for holding moisture. It holds a lot of moisture. This is wet right now. I can probably drip some of it out. It's like a sponge. So I use Spagna Moss for plants that like extra moisture. Stuff like Masdevallias and Dracula orchids get quite a bit of Spagna Moss in their mix. It's probably 90% Spagna Moss for the Draculas that never really want to dry out. Now I also mix Spagna Moss with the fir bark of the different varieties, and I do that depending on my watering schedule for that plant. So if you're a person that waters every day, you're probably not going to need a lot of Spagna Moss in with your bark, say for a Cattleya. But if you're someone that only waters once a week, maybe taking a pair of scissors, cutting up some of this and putting it in with some of the bark is going to do good for your mixture. Now, Spagna Moss is great for holding water, but one of its downfalls is it really compacts easily, and over time it compresses. So if you remember, we're talking about this bark provides lots of air to the roots, doesn't compress very easily. Even when it does, it leaves lots of hole spaces, but this really compresses. So what I do in order to keep the Spagna Moss from compressing is I use Perlite. So this is Perlite here. There's a chunk of it there. Perlite is great for adding air to a mixture and keeping it from compressing. So if you were to use, say, 100% Spagna Moss for a Phalaenopsis orchid, it's going to compress, and after a year or so the roots are going to start to rot because of a lack of airflow. So if you were to add a bunch of Spagna Moss or a bunch of Perlite to the sphagnum, it's going to keep it from compressing, and it's going to keep little air pockets in it. This stuff does hold water, but it actually holds air as well. So a good mixture of about 50% Spagna Moss and 50% Perlite will keep the Spagna Moss from compressing on you. And when you start mixing the three ingredients together, you can start making a mix for virtually everything as long as you're using it in the right proportions. Now a few other ingredients that I use, less often, but mind you I still use. This here is coconut chunks or coconut fiber. Coconut husk, we'll call it, is similar in size to the bark. Oops, get the Spagna Moss out of there. So you can see some bark here and the coconut here. Now a good thing about coconut is it is very light and it holds a lot of water. So if you look at this piece here, let's see if I can focus on it. Maybe a little further back. There we go. Anyways, if you squeeze it, you can see water come out of it. Coconut chunks like this are a very light material, but they hold lots and lots of water. So a good way to add water to a mix would be add a little bit of the coconut chunks here, the coconut husk, and say if you had a bark mix that you didn't want to dry out so fast, you could cut it with, say, 1/3 of the coconut husks, and that some of these materials would then be mixed in and really hold the water in. You can see it just bubbling out there when I squeeze it, to retain a little bit more water for your roots. I don't like to use this 100%. It does stay nice and light and airy, but it stays wet for a long time. And I find it actually stays so airy, it never even really settles down. It always just kind of rolls around. And at any point, if you were to use just these coconut chunks here, if you tip the pot upside down, it would pretty much empty out, because they don't even sort of lock together to settle into the pot properly. So, oops, before we leave these guys, one note on these, and I find it a downfall because you can never really tell. Being coconut grows in salty areas like on the beach, you always want to make sure you rinse off your coconut husks or your coconut bark there before you use it. I like to unwrap the package, throw it in a bucket of water, and you'll see all the tannins and presumably salts come out of it. And you want to keep rinsing it out until there's not as much tannins in there. Give it a good 5 to 7 days underwater, with continually flushing the water out every day. If you don't do that, I would be worried personally about these leaching out some salts and burning the roots. Now, since we're right here anyways, I will show you this. The next ingredient that I use every once in a while is lava rock. So lava rock is going to be similar to the bark again, but very inert, very fast drying, so it gives extremely good flow through and makes it a very fast draining mix. A lot of times if I put a vanda in a pot, I will use a lot of lava rock because it never goes rotten, it never breaks down, it never compresses. It does hold a little bit of water just in the pores for a little while, and then is dry again. So it works good in mixes that you want to always be watering, but always wanting to dry out by the end of the night. So stuff like cattleyas you could use it for. There's a lot of different rock orchids. Some lilias are, I think the word is rucopulus, where they live on rocks instead of in the trees. So lava rock would be a good alternative to use there. And the last ingredient we're going to talk about, and I've just started using this, and I have actually found it to be really nice, is this is just peat moss itself. So you can't use peat moss in most orchids, but you can use peat moss, say when you're repotting a cymbidium and other terrestrial orchids that need a little bit more sort of fineness close to the roots, we'll say. Any of the terrestrial ones are used to growing with a little bit more pumice or humus in the roots, and I find it holds some moisture in there. So when you take a mixture of, we'll say, some medium bark and add some fine bark to it, we'll add a little bit of Spagna Moss for good measure. You want to counter the Spagna Moss with a little bit of perlite. Then you just add a bit of peat moss to it. It ends up making a great terrestrial mix. I haven't been using this long term, so I don't know what long-term results are, but I have been using it for the last 12 months or so like this, and been having good results with my Cymbidium roots. So there's an alternative. I can't say I've used it more than a handful of times on just a few different orchids, but I thought since we're talking about the different mixes, I would throw that one in there. And before I let you go, I just thought I'd show you this bulbophyllum. I just potted this up yesterday, so you can see the mix that I use here. I used a little bit of medium bark, a little bit of fine bark, and some perlite, and I believe there's a touch of spagna moss in there. Not much, just a touch. But that's the way these mixtures look when they're all mixed up. I will swing you this way here, so you can see in my bucket here I have a little bit of mix pre-done up. This is a terrestrial mix. It does have peat moss in it, so I would use that for Cymbidiums. What else can I show you? I'm going to walk you slowly over here. This is a Fragapedalum. It has some medium bark, and then to fill in the air spaces of the medium bark, I used perlite as sort of in replacement of a small pebble, and it keeps the mix very light and airy, and yet holds moisture in for the plant. Let's see. This is an update on the Phalaenopsis that I repotted just a few weeks ago. So we can see the mix that I used here. I used medium bark for lots of air spaces. I used a bit of moss because we never want Phalaenopsis to dry out. And if you look close in there, I use perlite as well because we want to keep the moss from compacting down in. You can see a new root is starting right there as well. So there's 3 examples of different ways that I have used this mix. So anyways guys, this short video on orchid mixes ended up being a 10-minute video. I hope everybody stuck with me through all this. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And as always, thanks for watching.